So it is 2 minutes past one. I am your host for today, Andy Newbold, editor of Landwards and sneaky note taker via my Otter AI app, clearly. We are joined today by IAgrE member David Whattoff. And David, I think you can probably introduce yourself quite happily, but you're going to talk a bit about yourself, a bit about what you do, and how you can use technology to make sensible decisions. Is that a good enough starter?
Yeah, it's a great start. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm pleased I could have arranged some sunshine. That's the only miracle of the day, I'm afraid. Yes, I've been the MD for METOS UK, which is an affiliate of Pestle Instruments, a company based in Austria. A little bit more about that shortly. Been in agriculture all of my life, practical farm management for over 20 years, then joined Frontier for a number of years as a development manager for precision farming. And latterly, last 7 or 8 years, I've been with Pestle Instruments, promoting and co-developing products and solutions for the agricultural and horticultural space with meteorological sensors. Okay, now that's great. So, from data to decisions. Yes, I think when I was first asked to get stuck into the presentation, I think it's important that the weather station and monitoring the weather is quite a British preoccupation, and certainly what got me interested working with Pestle was the opportunity to use some of their broader expertise in terms of using the data for decisions, and that's certainly something which we'll explore over the next hour. So let's see why that's not moving forward. So a little bit of background about Pestle Instruments. Pestle Instruments is based in Austria. Gottfried Pestle, a number of you will know Gottfried. He has very successfully developed a business and a global reach, primarily selling weather stations, but also associated precision farming equipment. And we're certainly proud to be able to say that we're on every continent in the world, and we've got over 100,000 sensors on various farms on a multitude of crops, recording data. I think what began to really open the door in the very early days was sort of the mobile connectivity. Even up until the last last 3 or 4 years, it has been a little bit of a wild west. But what it has allowed us to do is give the opportunity of putting sensors on farm so that people can make decisions. Simple things like too wet or too dry for soil moisture probes can make a significant impact on irrigation costs, and conversely, to how windy it is or what the temperature it is, has allowed you to make better decisions for spraying. So with these basic commitments, as a business, we pride ourselves on our innovation, customer satisfaction, sustainability, teamwork, and integrity. And we've developed over time a nested approach to IoT agriculture. So IoT, a little bit of lingo, Internet of Things, connected sensors effectively. And we have got a portfolio of products which allows the grower to look at all the various parts of his farm. So some things which we'll be looking at today are the insect management and the weather forecasting, but other things like tracking and frost management and soil moisture monitoring are also part of our broader portfolio. And to help with the connectivity, we have and a lot of this this partnering has been possible with our open approach to. We've certainly looked to engage with third parties, share data, share technologies, so that companies can utilize the customer's data and package it forward in an interesting way. So a very brief look at the portfolio. and how it works. We have a cloud system which we call Field Climate. This is where all of our different stations report to. We bring in the data from all of our sensors, and that centralized goes into here. And then whether you're looking for field climate as an end user, or whether you've worked using our data through a partner with an open API, then we have that flexibility to deliver that. So the ubiquitous weather station, as I mentioned, we've been at it 40 years. We've won numerous awards around the world, and certainly as Agritechnica for developing products. And the METOS 1 back in the day was a weather station which allowed people to monitor apple diseases, apple scab, and it managed those permutations. The sensors you see here are fairly ubiquitous. I mean, we have a wind speed, rain gauge, and a brain box. We've got some solar radiation going on in here. But this is our latest generation. This is our METOS 5, and we're particularly proud of the METOS 5 because it offers a number of solutions to the grower and answers a number of questions which we've been having. The unit inside has two pieces. So we have this area here, the lower egg. Andy, can you see my cursor? Is that working? Andy?
Yeah, just give it a quick wobble, David.
Can you see my cursor?
Yeah, just about. Only on the coloured background, not on the white.
Right, yeah, understood. Okay, so this here is our motherboard. It's standard across the range, so it offers connectivity. The main sensors are along the bottom, and then we have a range of programmable sensors across the middle. What makes us unique is that we have an interchangeable communications board. And so removing these 4 screws, we can take the communication board out and we can make it universal for different frequencies across the world, for different territories. We can change it for Wi-Fi, and we can also change it for the new satellite, near Earth satellite communication. So it gives us a real flexible output. And certainly having that is very helpful. Communication in the field with 4G or 2 and 3G has been possible. 4G was great, but it offers such a breadth of frequency that such a breadth of spectrum rather, that we don't really need all of it. So latterly, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've been having these different communication protocols, LTE, Cat-M1, and also NB-IoT, which allows us to just send data much more cost effectively on a much more cleaner frequency. So yeah, the METOS 5 is certainly a useful and a flexible product. The other product which we'll be looking to discuss in practical applications is our iScout. This is a pheromone-based insect trap. You pop the pheromone in the bottom of the trap here with a sticky paper, and in the top of the unit we have a 10 megapixel camera. This takes the images of the insects which are trapped and then automatically uploads those to the platform, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail as we come along. The other product we've got, which is useful, is CropView. This is and again uses some AI capability to allow us to count and monitor, particularly in the fruit and soft fruit market space. We can identify apple sizes and create a graph of growth performance. Uses very similar technology in terms of the camera motherboard itself, but in this stage it's just really useful for time-lapse photography and monitoring research plots over time. Just going back, you'll notice that both camera systems are solar powered. We've got a control unit down here. The power underneath is a 6 volt 12 amp hour battery. just topped up by the solar. So they're completely autonomous, and the ability to deploy these is effectively limited by how much energy you can get. So we would limit this in the UK to maximum of 2 pictures per day, whereas in brighter climates you'd get 3 pictures a day. So that's some of the flexibility. Something for the spray site spraying things which we've got recently. This is our drop site box. What it allows us to do is monitor spray deposition, and instead of using the leaf paper, we've got the ability to put a liquid tracer in the sprayer. You spray the crop on the trial area. You harvest some of the leaves from the crop, pop them in the box, and then we have a little app which goes in the mobile phone. Mobile phone goes in the top, takes an image, and it will then count the or calculate the spray deposition on the leaf surface. And finally, just as a bit of a product roundup at this stage, we've got what we're calling the METOS Streamo. It's a device which actually monitors the activity of the stomata opening and closing, and it's a leaf clip which goes onto the leaf, and that allows for monitoring stress of the plant prior to in advance of the soil moisture getting to a dangerous place. So this will notice that the stomata is closing before the soil moisture probe is saying you've got a significant deficit. So that's just a quick run through of some of the technologies which we add to. All of these technologies will run into our field climate decision support system. And you can see here, we've got the forecasting and monitoring, disease modeling, insect monitoring. We've got a selection of planning tools and the ability to export the data. And then they're providing the grower with information for timing, applications, planning, crop health, and giving him a full suite of knowledge with the dependent or the outcomes, with optimizing resource usage, improving yield, improving quality, and the sustainable environmental questions beginning to be answered. So we're really proud of it, and there is the ability to just start with a single piece or build the whole family of products. So over to the meat of the presentation, looking at disease models. One of the challenges which farmers often have is thinking about how best to apply their expensive inputs, and indeed getting the best value from those. And understanding how a plant disease, its life cycle, and separating that life cycle to factors which can then become triggers, allows us to significantly improve the timing and the outcomes of pesticides. If we just look at the disease triangle up in this corner, we've got the host, which is naturally the crop. We've got the pathogen, which is obviously the disease, and then we've got the environment. And in terms of the environment, it's often understated, with the flexibility of modern systemic pesticides, how to sort of get the best out of that timing. But as we're moving forward to more biocides and products which are really very sensitive to having the right environmental conditions, monitoring the environment and using a simple system which allows you to give you a go no go decision is really key. So we've got here some basic precursors which we need to understand. So we're looking at temperature, relative humidity, rain gauge, and leaf wetness. Leaf wetness is an interesting one because it's not how wet the leaf is, it's how long the leaf is wet for. Because ultimately it's the moisture on the leaf surface which is giving the pathogen the moisture it requires to be able to sporulate and to be able to develop. And if within that life cycle, the leaf wetness, if leaf is just temporarily wet, but you have a warm, drying day, and that leaf wetness is then removed, then the ability for that pathogen to develop is significantly reduced. And so we are looking particularly in understanding how we could utilize this environmental information and how we could then say, right, at this particular timing, now would be good. So this diagram here is a cross section of the leaf, and it shows three main areas of the disease life cycle. So we've got here the fungal spore hasn't started to grow, but just landing on the leaf surface. We've got the incubation period, and then we've got the sporulation. And allowing knowledge of this allows us to plan. So if the pathogen spore is on the leaf and the conditions, the climatic conditions aren't such that we can get to the next stage, then they will just stay on the spore and they won't develop further. But the moment we get to a point where we get some increase in humidity, increase in temperature, and the conditions allow the spore to grow, the spore then will go into the leaf surface and then begin to develop, create colonization, and then ultimately you begin to see the spores. And then different diseases have a different length of incubation. So from actually the pathogen landing to actually being seen, you've got a period here of a number of days, depending on the particular disease. So in summary, the fungal spore arrives to the plant surface, waiting for good conditions. There are no symptoms or any damages. This is the latest stage to provide a preventative treatment and avoid damage. So that's in here. The second stage is under the good conditions, the spores germinate and penetrate the plant, and the first light symptoms can be visible, possibility for curative treatments. And then the third stage is when the disease is on the plant and produces new spores, and it's fully visible. So that's what's happening on the leaf. So what's happening within field climate? So within field climate, we generate in fact, I'll just go for a couple of slides forward. We monitor together the climatic conditions and create a chart which reflects those. So here is Septoria. The infection starts after we have half a mil of rain, so it doesn't need much for the infection to start. And the optimal conditions for Septoria are between 16 and 21 degrees, with a leaf wetness or a high humidity of 14 hours. So for that spore to do something, these have got to be true. So we look down at the weather station and we look at monitoring these conditions. So what have we got here? So we're looking for some rain. So these blue bars down here, which I'm at the bottom of the chart, these blue bars here are showing the rainfall. And so you can see some rainfall just above the 18th of August down here. We're then looking for some temperature. So this line here is the temperature. So you can see the diurnal effect. You can sort of see daytime and nighttime temperatures, giving you this wave effect. So we've got 21, 22 degrees. So you can clearly see we are within that. And then we're looking for some high humidity. So this purple line is high humidity. This would be 100%. This would be around 70% down here. And we're looking for some leaf wetness of 14 hours. And each one of these green bars would represent 15 minutes of leaf wetness. So You can see here with the climatic conditions in the bottom, you've got the leaf wetness beginning to accumulate consistently. So you've got rainfall, you've got high humidity, and you've got perfect temperatures. That allows us to start building the graph. And the graph is starting to increase, and we've got light, moderate, and severe infections, which is specific to Septoria. And you can see then that begins to develop. When the temperature starts to drop and we don't have any rainfall, you can see that the chart then drops and we've got a clear period. And then we get more rainfall, more high humidity consistently, and then it starts to drop. So what you can see is when all of the triggers become true, then the chart starts to rise. When the conditions are such that it's not possible, then we've got some breathing space. So if we go back to this chart, again, this would be in summary. The best if we start here, we've got the different severity conditions. So for Septoria, these severity conditions would be a gauge on the varieties. So if you have a really susceptible variety, you would be more looking at a light infection. Whereas if you have a more susceptible variety, a more resistant variety, you would look more for a moderate infection. The infection pressure depends on the intensity of the environmental factors. So where in that previous example, we had rainfall, temperature, humidity, and leaf wetness all conspiring together, that gave the chart a real kick. The time of onset of symptoms depends on the environmental conditions of the pathogen. So this may be 2 to 5 days, which is that gap. And then ultimately you then beginning to see the symptoms. So this is how the charts work, and that there was how it would be presented to the grower in terms of the meteorological conditions and the risk to the crop. Different diseases require different sensors. We do 85 different crops globally. Everything from sunflowers, cucumbers, avocados. Just to keep it simple and for my own sanity, we're on looking at some wheat and barley. And so for Septoria, we're just looking at rainfall, temperature, humidity, and leaf wetness. But interestingly, for the rusts, we also need to add the solar radiation. So there's different sensors are required for different disease monitoring. So how does this look when we're looking to develop it from a spraying tactics point of view? So again, we've now understand what the charts mean a little bit more, and this hopefully will give a little bit of colour to the opportunities. So this is the grower's crop. This is areas here where there's no infection. We start to see some infection rising here. We've treated the plant on the 31st of March, just as a standard treatment. And this was sort of based on a calendar schedule. So if you've got a situation where you are, so blight would be a good example, where people are going every 7 to 10 days, and they're doing that absolutely religiously. There might be a period of time here when there is no disease which is current. That pesticide is being applied. There is no risk of disease here because the conditions are such, but the diseases are starting to go, and then we're starting to enter the unprotected period because the systemic product has started to lose its fire. So that then means we've got an area here which we could improve on if we could find a way to improve this start date. If we now look, so here was the chemical treatment on the 31st of March. If we say, well, if we just jump forward to a chemical treatment a little bit sooner, and allowing for the fact that instead of doing it every 7 to 10 days, we'll start to look at some of the risk. We can then say, well, we can move this treatment forwards, and then we can look to catch the disease going forward. Now, this might be based on a crop development phase. So you might say, well, you know, we've got to a rosette stage with the potatoes, or we've got to the stem extension. with new leaves in cereals, we need to think about this. But if we take it one step further and actually look to a period of time where we've got a response, and you can see that the conditions have had that effect, and then we time the chemical based on the fact that we know we've absolutely got to spray. So you've got a sort of a period here. You'll get a little bit of kickback, which will be looked to be protective of here, and then moving forwards, you've got that area under the control of the systemic product. And then ultimately, if it starts to dry up and cool down, then there's the reduced infection risk. So the disease models, to me, give the opportunity for farmers to actually look at the metrics, read where the risk is on the disease development. Now, how I best describe this to growers is I talk about a number line where you'd go from 0 to 10. And typically, where if you're not looking at the climatic conditions, you might be down to, in terms of the opportunity and the efficacy of your timing, might be a 2 or a 3. If you are looking at every condition and you have the resources to look at the plant pathologically and understand that the disease was there, might be an 8 or 9. But being able to monitor the disease allows this input to get to in my opinion, a 5 or 6. And when you have a high density of applications, certainly with the likes of potatoes or in soft fruit, for example, you have the opportunity of stretching some of those applications according to need rather than calendar, and that will allow you to reduce your inputs. So that's in summary where we were for disease monitoring. What I'd like to do now is spend a few minutes looking at some insect monitoring and looking at that as an overview. So insects are certainly becoming much more of a challenge, and certainly as the insecticides are being significantly restricted, understanding what you've got and where is a problem. Global warming is also giving conditions where, as a country and a territory, we're becoming warmer and wetter, and we're starting to see an influx of new pests which are starting to have an impact on fairly standard arable growing. So beet moth would be a prime example of this, where it wasn't there until recently, and now all of a sudden, beet moth and more importantly, the caterpillar is creating a significant risk to fairly standard field scale cropping. So the iScout is a piece of hardware which I mentioned before. We've got various different housings and we've got a camera in the top. The housings come in various different permutations. So this light housing here would be a fairly standard pheromone trap for a day feeder. You would have, and that means it's a nice light environment. Whereas if you had a night feeding pest, then we have a one where the housing is smoked, is a very, very dark green, and that would encourage the pest to go inside. The pheromone is placed on the plate and the sticky paper, and then in a very standard way, the insect would fly in, become trapped, and be monitored by the system. So this is an example of the image analysis, and this is Silver Y and Pea moth example, which we did with a large group, pea group not far away from home. The system, the insects are caught on the sticky paper, and the images are uploaded. And you can see the efficacy of the pheromone effect. So this is 23 detections on the July in 24, 2nd of July 24. And then a fortnight later, we've got 77 detections. And then at the end of the month, 4 weeks later, we've got 95 detections. Each image is uploaded into our server, and within the AI system, we can identify between the aphids, the flies, the spiders, and the system will automatically create an overview of what's being caught. If there is an area which you wanted to identify more particularly, you can actually grab the crosshairs, click it on there, and you can begin to train the system as you needed it. With those different values being accumulated, you can then begin to see the different times where we are getting the catches and what's happening here. So this is looking at those images simultaneously over the same period as here. So this is where we've got very few on the 2nd, and this is where we've got over 100. And you can see here how that population is beginning to increase over that same timestamp. And you can see primarily, sort of diptera flies were being caught at this area, but various areas here are allowing you to catch that. So in terms of this technology, the camera system itself retails at around £1,300, which is a lot of money in comparison to a sort of a wet drop trap. This, I believe, comes into its own as an early warning system where you would have these in various areas and you would have them as early warning to be able to give you the heads up. So you're not necessarily, the pest is coming. You're probably early mid-June getting on with some other jobs, and you're just interested to know when things start to happen. All of the images are uploaded onto your mobile phone, so you can easily see what's happening on the traps remotely, and also the population is beginning to happen. So in terms of threshold, you could potentially use this as threshold, but realistically, if you're looking for three or four insects per plant, then this isn't giving you that. But what this is giving you is a very clear indication with practical outcomes to be able to see the insects trapped on the system. We've also got another way of counting, and I mentioned that the iScout, the housing trap system is very good for early warning. One of the big challenges agronomists face when they've got a lot of water traps out is the challenge of having to count the insects in individual water traps. Not only is it actively challenging that the little varmints are floating on the surface and you need to count them, but you also need to accurately record what's happening. So we have what we call iScout Mobile. It's a little app which you put on the phone. You take an image of your surface, and it will automatically count the insects which are there. It gives the agronomists an accumulation of population over time, and is a fairly indispensable tool for just allowing scouting to happen with accurate metrics. And again, a lot of the things here are as you'd expect. It gives a chart, and you can export the traps via a CSV. So if you had an agronomist and he's got 7 or 8 of these on his patch, then he could share that as a more centralized output. Another way insect monitoring is using degree days and heat units. And an interesting factor for this one would be oh dear, I've forgot, lost it for a moment. Looking at the aphids in barley, barley yellow dwarf virus. We're looking for an accumulated period of 170 degree days for an optimum time of spraying from emergence. And very simply, we within field climate, just using the temperature sensors, we uh, accumulate the growing degree days. And so growers can very easily see, well, I've got establishment on this particular day, let's say the 1st of October, or then over time, you can see when you hit 170, and that will give you the optimum opportunity to impact the insect. So again, a very simple tool, which is easy to implement. So just as a very quick final and sort of summary to my main presentation, integration is something which, again, we're particularly proud of. We offer, an open API connectivity with our various partners for not only the soil moisture but also the disease models and the insects. That information, for example, within John Deere Operations Center, will allow a particular station to appear on the map, and the customer can click on it to have basic high-level information. And if he double clicks on it, it then takes him further. But we also deal with other third-party disease companies. So those of you who in the top fruit will have heard of Rimpro. This is looking primarily to apple scab, and again, our stations are integral to having that data. So it's something which we're very open to, very proud to be able to offer, and gives growers tremendous flexibility. And again, we have an open API. So finally, our PESL products are used on all 5 continents. We cover a whole multitude of crops with a whole multitude of sensors. And thank you for my presentation. I'm open to some questions.
Thank you, David. That was fascinating. We've got a few questions in the chat. Now, after a bit of digging and some private messaging, I've ascertained that iPad Air 2 is actually Andrew Cragg, who's running 2 systems because he's expecting a power cut. So he's got his iPad tethered to his mobile phone when the internet goes down. But I'll start with Andrew's question. Disease models for 85? However many crops must have required a lot of research. Where did the data for the models come from?
Yes,
Those for the jugular there.
Yeah, no. So basically, the data for the research is sort of widely available, and we're looking primarily at the broad spectrum. So it is. So if I go, let me just go back to some slides. Let me just share again, because I did show a slide with that. Just one second. Is that working? Yeah.
It will in a minute. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just wake it up a little bit. So if we just go back to so in the literature here for our septoria, we've got some papers in here which we directly used for our research. So there's a 2019 paper there, 2008, and ultimately, if on our website we've got if you Googled METOS disease models or PESL disease models, we've got a whole raft of reviewed literature resource there, which is where the information comes from.
No, that's good. Bob's asked a question as well, and this is quite an interesting sideways question, which I had an equivalent thought about when I was looking at the insect monitoring model. But basically, Bob says, do you or could you provide dew point temperature forecast warnings to inform potato store managers that their stored crops may suffer condensation and potential disease if store doors are opened?
Um, yes, is the answer to that question. So we have a range of smaller sensors which are suitable for buildings. We've got a dew point calculation as part of our um, main output. So obviously, dew point is a calculated value, not a measured value. And then we've got an alarm system, an alert system, which then would basically say if the following climatic conditions were true, then we'll send an alert to the grower.
So it's there, isn't it? From memory in my within my field climate app for my, and I'll declare an interest now. I have a METOS weather station. I think I've got dew point in there as well, actually.
Yes, you have.
So the info's there. It's in true ag engineering fashion. It's the interpretation and the use of it, which is the critical point here, isn't it?
I
Um,
think I think one of my biggest challenges has been um, it's within our territory, on the whole, Mother Nature always provides. So we're sort of warm enough, cool enough, damp enough, sunny enough to produce a reasonable crop of something with a little bit of looking after. Other territories don't have the, the weight or the heft of the agronomic services behind them. And equally they are in much more challenging climates. So I mean, I've got a colleague in Australia, and his forecasted temperature 3 weeks ago was 48 degrees. And as such, these guys are much more in tune with the need to look at the data and the need for the data to mean something. Whereas in the UK, um, this the this information is not is it doesn't seem to have been grabbed hold of, given that these disease models are relatively simple and, with my example of a number line, have a positive impact, but not going to completely change the way you're doing things. It's just adding some proper metrics, allowing you to think about your timing. And it's been difficult within the UK context for people to sort of pick this up and make a difference. I mean, it might be that the chemistry is so good, it might be that the agronomists are completely on their game, and as such, the disease is less of a challenge. But certainly there's a reluctance to stroke the rule, if you like.
yeah. Um, Oh, Paul Miller. Question from Prof. Paul Miller. Who are the main competitors to METOS?
So in terms of agricultural disease models, very few. In terms of weather stations, we have many. I think the biggest competitor would be a Davis station, I suppose. And in terms of sort of scientific stations, then there's the Campbell Scientifics of this world who would have a higher entry point price for the hardware. I think what we have done is we've looked at the growers space holistically, and we've tried to say what part of the business does the farmer really need to monitor? What part is it which is going to make a difference to him? And we've offered a breadth of solutions which can be fitted. I mean, there are other competitive products out there which would take each of these probably singularly, but with the field climate app, the grower has access to the whole range centrally, and our big USP, I suppose.
Yeah, and as you say, that graph that illustration you put up just before, which you moved past, which lists the partners and the people you work with at different levels, makes the point about being part of a network, for want of a better word, with your leading partners. There you go. So you've
Yeah.
not bet the farm on any one particular commitment. Andrew Cragg, via his nom de plume, has said, if you have a big estate with broadacre crops, could you use a network of your stations to interpolate data for specific locations?
Yes, you could, and it would be lovely to get to that situation. There's clearly competitive market space out there. I mean, I've overlooked Sencrop as a competitor. They've done very well to populate with a number of sensors. I think I think a higher density of anything with accurate, repeatable data will give you a much more informed insight. There is that opportunity to do that. There is, and the density need not be too great, given we have fairly predictable prevailing conditions in the UK, and growers who are, you know, more on the west will be aware of conditions before us growers on the east, and you could then look to use that information.
Which brings me on to neatly, and I apologise because I'm making the major number one chair's mistake now, which is I'm going to ask my own question now, David. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the delegate's fault for not putting enough in the chat. Um, I've come across the terminology of virtual weather stations.
You have.
As someone who has a real weather station, I'm guessing that's in the world of extrapolation between existing sources of data.
Yes, it is. And I was going to put a couple of slides in, but I really was very conscious of what the meat of the presentation was about. So I didn't want to have a long sales pitch. So a virtual weather station is exactly that. It is modeled data, and our preferred or our partner in that is a company called Meteo Blue, based in Switzerland, and they have a global meteorological solution. What a virtual weather station will do will allow us to put a GPS point on any given point across the Earth and take that model data. What makes it a virtual weather station is that we are actually recording that data just and charting it just as if you had an actual physical station. Now, different territories are susceptible to different accuracies. So in the UK, with our propensity to write everything down and have lots of opportunity to fine tune the model, on the whole of UK virtual weather stations are surprisingly accurate. So things like wind speed and temperature and those I would be very comfortable with. Things like rainfall, they're based on radar data, and by default, they are more subjective. So what we offer is what we actually call a hybrid station. So somebody might want to have a basic weather station, but they want the ability to record other sensors which they might not immediately have. And we can overlay a hybrid station over a physical station. So you could have a simple station which just records rain, for argument's sake, so you get a really accurate picture of your rainfall, but you're then getting all the other parameters which are then available to you, and they're recorded. And crucially, things it's a weather station, whether it brings me recording the data, you're then getting that picture over time of what's occurring. So, and the hybrid is something which is there. So virtual weather stations, no sensors at all. Hybrid is basic sensor set with the virtual overlay, and then you have a full weather station, which would be all the full sensor set.
And I'm guessing in the hybrid situation, what you're saying is we're trimming down the sensors to give you the most significant factors, and then we're overlaying the things which we think we're quite comfortable extrapolating between points A and B, where your actual sensors are sitting in the middle.
Exactly that. That's exactly what we're saying. Where if you went to Canada, or if you went to more central areas of Australia, the things like wind speed and direction are, where they're really very predictable in the UK, are much more unpredictable. And interestingly, it's not necessarily the those factors are important for agronomic reasons, but they're much more practical for safety and reasons, primarily because we're looking at grass fires. And if you look at the terrible surface fires in Australia a few years ago, one of the major factors for sales of weather stations was to have accurate data, because
Mm.
those of you who've been would probably be aware of this. I was only made aware of this last year, but the farmers in these remote territories are seconded into the sort of the volunteer fire service, and almost to the point that they have to put their own fires out. And understanding what the wind conditions are, how hot it is, we actually do have a grass fire risk monitor within field climate for those guys who are in that situation.
Yeah, and it can deliver some value. This probably leads on to this. I'd sort of scribbled in my margin in my filler questions in case nobody asked a question. Declan's asked it though. What's the most used comms system in the UK by your users?
Yeah, I think currently the most used currently would be would be between 2 and 4G at the moment,
Hmm.
primarily because 3G has now been knocked out. 2G has got a stay of execution until 2033, and 4G is basically the standard. Now, I alluded to earlier something called NB-IoT and LTE-M. So NB-IoT stands for Narrowband IoT, Internet of Things, and LTE-M is basically 4G mobile. What's unique about both of those is that it just uses a very narrow spectrum, hence the name narrowband, very narrow spectrum of the 4G network. And allegedly, this particular spectrum we're used for the data allows for longer distance transmission with lower power. So all we're looking to do is collect the basic factors. So that's hot, cold, wet, dry, on, off, basically. And so that data packet is very, very small. Now, from a manufacturer's point of view, that's great, because the biggest power consumption isn't the sensors, it's the modem. And it's that which allows us to have a low power, wide area network solution. So NB-IoT, it doesn't have to talk to the whole spectrum, it just talks to this very narrow band. It's got more depth of delivery, so you can have sensors further away and still getting good data back, and it allows it to come. Now, certainly back in the day when Sencrop were launched, they had a network which was called Sigfox, and Sigfox is like a privateer version of narrowband, and it required people to install their own localized antennas to fill the network gaps. And they were very simple boxes you just plugged into the internet, and that would allow that connectivity to your station. But the Sigfox story has sort of come to an end, and there's very much a broader interest on narrowband and also LTE-M. What I will say is wider to that, with the onset of Starlink from Elon Musk, bigger farms are now looking to do wide area Wi-Fi. Certainly, if you go to some of the soft fruit farms and the orchard farms, where you've got high density of value in a much smaller area, you can put these repeaters up. And we're getting many more inquiries now for our Wi-Fi solution rather than not. And that's simply down to the fact that you've got cost involved for an NB-IoT card for every device. So if somebody's got 10 devices on NB-IoT, that's 10 SIM cards. If somebody's got 10 devices on Wi-Fi, that's just one connection with the Wi-Fi.
And I mean, Declan hit the nail on the head with the comm system. My sort of filling one was, and I probably was leading to this. What is the biggest challenge to implementing this tech in the UK?
It's density of population. So the towers we need to make it work aren't prioritized over the high value towers, and I mean cell towers, this is in high density populations. If I went back 3 or 4 years, it was an utter farce, really, because O2 and Vodafone couldn't agree on which towers to upgrade amongst themselves. So they literally drew a line north to south through Birmingham, and everybody to the west was Vodafone, and everybody to the east was O2. And so if you tried to go to Kent with a Vodafone SIM card, it just wouldn't work. If you went to Kent with a two SIM card, all of a sudden it would light up. And of course, we tried to work really closely with both Vodafone and O2. So look, guys, we're only just trying to earn a living here. We only just want a little bit of knowledge, but trying to get that basic information out of them made no sense. Farmers were saying, well, I've got Vodafone connectivity, but of course they're not living in the middle of the field. Or if you have particularly in Kent, where you've got rolling hills, high density of trees and foliage, that signal is significantly degraded. They might not have upgraded or updated the cell tower because it's only on one particular farm where it's going to make a difference. So there is significant challenges around that for getting the data.
Yeah. I've got one last question because we've got 2 minutes to two now. Alan Plummer's just dived in with, is there potential for remote stroke auto drones to be incorporated in your ground-based systems to enhance monitoring of crops? A hybrid approach.
Hybrid. I would certainly say yes, because we've got a very open door API, and if it's something which you want to have a conversation about and see if we can lever some value out of that, then I'm very open to it. I think the thing I would just sort of do and just wrap all this up in terms of comms and drones and everything else, the 5G networks are definitely there. Certainly they have significant advantages, certainly for real-time video and real-time robot control and drone control. I see the value there. But there is considerable value with the relative low tech, which I've shared with you this afternoon, which can be delivered very cost effectively and offer growers, it's not a full solution, but realistic insight to what's actually happening on the farm to help them make best decisions.
And when it's a step forward from where you are, it doesn't matter whether it's the latest technology or very established. If it takes you on, that's the point, isn't it?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. No, David, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. I'm sure we can all show David our appreciation in the usual manner by hitting the applause reaction button at the bottom. There you go. Look at that. I've even done it myself there. Thank you, David. Just one piece of IAgrE housekeeping, which is that I've noticed in my IAgrE news, which I got, that voting is open for the presidential elections. So if you haven't voted, go onto the website or check your IAgrE news, which came through either yesterday or today, and there is a link there. I think that's open till the 17th. You've got 1 week to go. How's that sound? Thanks ever so much for your inputs, everybody. Feel free to stay and chat for a minute if you like. And if not, Sarah will kill us dead in a traditional brutal manner, which Zoom says goodbye to you.